Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone.
Authorities in Augusta, Georgia say that a local woman has been arrested and is facing charges this week after she allegedly deliberately drove her vehicle into a fast food restaurant because they messed up her order. The incident took place at around 7:45 p.m. on February 18th at the Popeyes Chicken Restaurant on Walton Way. According to reports, the situation began when a customer, later identified as 50-year-old Belinda Miller, became irate due to a mix-up with her order. In short, someone had forgotten to include her biscuits. Though staff rectified the issue and gave Miller her biscuits, it apparently did nothing to calm her down. Sensing something was up, another customer in line reportedly asked staff to hurry up with their order, telling them that they thought Miller was coming back. The customer's intuitions turned out to be correct. Police now say that after briefly leaving the fast food restaurant, Miller got behind the wheel of her SUV, which she proceeded to deliberately crash right into the building's left wall and front doors. Witnesses reportedly watched in horror as the 50-year-old narrowly missed an 18-year-old employee as she continued to try and force her vehicle farther inside to maximize the damage. Miller allegedly only stopped once debris from the crash physically prevented her SUV from going forward anymore. She then fled the scene. Officers reportedly caught up with Miller later on when she returned home. Her vehicle was apparently easy to spot because of all the damage to its front end. Miller was placed under arrest and is now facing charges including aggravated assault and first-degree criminal damage to property.
Authorities in Suffolk County, New York say that they are dealing with the fallout from the latest idiotic TikTok trend this week after they arrested several juveniles and an adult in connection with a crime inspired by the so-called Kool-Aid Man challenge. The incident began at around 1 a.m. on February 20th when a homeowner in Centereach heard loud noises coming from outside his house. Surveillance cameras revealed that a group of 6 males had kicked down several sections of fence on his property. According to reports, the group returned about 3 hours later, this time to run through the fence simultaneously. Police arrested the suspects at around 4:15 a.m. that morning after a black vehicle they were in was witnessed driving near the scene. Police say that it was later revealed that the crime was inspired by the Kool-Aid Man challenge on TikTok. According to reports, the so-called prank involves participants attempting to run through fences, walls, or kick in doors while shouting, "Oh yeah," in an attempt to mimic the Kool-Aid Man mascot from the powdered drink product's iconic 90s and early 2000s commercials. According to reports, the suspects, identified only as 5 juveniles and an 18-year-old, are now facing charges of 3rd and 4th degree criminal mischief. Authorities say that the group are not the first to pull such a stunt in the area, as they have also had to deal with at least 2 other incidents in the county.
Authorities in St. Lucie County, Florida say that a 22-year-old man is facing murder charges this week after he allegedly murdered his roommate and tried to conceal the crime by burying his body in a shallow grave in the backyard. The incident began on February 12th when authorities were called to a property in the city of Fort Pierce with reports that someone had seen blood in the backyard. When officers arrived at the scene, it wasn't long before a second chilling discovery was made: a partially exposed human foot sticking out of what appeared to be a shallow grave. When the site was excavated, investigators found the body of a Hispanic male estimated to be between the ages of 35 and 45 years old. An autopsy revealed that he had died of blunt force injuries and had suffered severe facial injuries, a broken nose, and several broken ribs. He also had gravel and soil inside his larynx, trachea, lungs, and stomach. After learning that the unidentified victim rented a shed on the property, they spoke with his roommate, 22-year-old Brian Marquez. Under questioning, Marquez reportedly admitted to killing the victim, who he said he only knew by the name Guanajuato. Police now say that on the evening of the alleged murder, Marquez and the victim got into an argument after the victim threw a plate of Marquez's food on the floor of their shared dwelling. At first, Marquez didn't do anything, but after several hours of drinking, he decided to confront him. During the confrontation, Marquez allegedly beat the victim until he fell to the ground. Once he was down, he reportedly shoved dirt and gravel into his mouth 2 separate times. Marquez claimed that it wasn't until he told the victim to stand up and he didn't respond that he realized he was dead. Instead of calling police, however, He had dragged the man's body into the yard, buried him in the hole where he was later found, and went to sleep. Following his confession, Marquez was charged with murder. According to reports, both the 22-year-old and the unidentified victim were undocumented immigrants from Mexico. Police say that prior to his arrest, Marquez was planning to flee back to his native country and had been communicating with his family members about his plans. At the time of this recording, he remains in jail without bond.
Authorities in Salt Lake County, Utah say that a local family has been left devastated this week after a woman and her dog were killed when they were allegedly deliberately locked inside of a storage unit that was later the scene of a fire. According to reports, the incident began sometime on February 18th when workers at a car wash in the city of Murray noticed flames and smoke coming from a nearby CubeSmart self-storage facility. Firefighters were called to the scene, where they discovered at least 6 of the units on fire. Things soon took a tragic turn when authorities made a chilling discovery while combing through the wreckage after the blaze was extinguished. Inside one of the charred units were the remains of a woman and dog. The pair have since been identified as 27-year-old Morgan K. Harris and her dog, Huck. Just one day later, police arrested Morgan's boyfriend in connection with the incident, 30-year-old Alexander Wardell. Authorities say that Wardell admitted to deliberately locking his 27-year-old girlfriend and her dog in the storage unit prior to the fire and leaving them there, leaving them with no hope of escape once the structure erupted into flames. At the time of this recording, it appears that the cause of the fire at the storage facility is still unknown, though police are still analyzing the scene. Currently, Wardell is facing charges of kidnapping and negligent homicide, though more charges could be added pending the outcome of the investigation. Making matters more disturbing is the fact that Wardell reportedly had a long track record of criminal behavior prior to this week's deadly incident. Local media reports state that he has multiple convictions for domestic violence-related offenses, with the most recent notable case occurring in 2018. During that incident, Wardell reportedly beat a former girlfriend with a golf club and also threatened her with a knife. Though he spent 200 days in jail while awaiting trial for the brutal attack, he ultimately pleaded guilty and was given just 36 months of probation rather than the potential maximum of 5 years in prison. Since then, reports state that Wardell has been in and out of jail on a number of parole violations, with the most recent occurring just 2 days before the alleged murder. He was let out of jail the day before after paying a $5,000 bond. In the aftermath of Morgan's death, her devastated family released a statement in honor of her, reading in part, quote, "Morgan was always known for her sweet, shy, and kind temperament, being a deep thinker with amazing artistic abilities and always having an infectious giggle. She was a beautiful model and makeup artist and a successful medical assistant. Just recently starting a new job in the Draper area she was excited about. She loved her dog Huck, who passed with her, leaving behind her parents, siblings, nieces, and nephews, whom she adored."
Representatives from the LAPD say that they're investigating a bizarre case this week after a man allegedly threatened to blow up an iconic California landmark, only to immediately be foiled by his apparent lack of knowledge of geography. According to reports, the incident took place sometime on February 19th when a man called police with an alarming threat. Unless they agreed to pay him $10,000, he was going to blow up the famous Hollywood sign that overlooks Los Angeles. While the situation was already quite strange to begin with, things almost immediately got even weirder. You see, the suspect had messed up. He wasn't on the phone with police in Hollywood, California. He had accidentally called authorities in Hollywood, Florida instead, a city roughly 2,700 miles away from his alleged target on the complete opposite side of the country. Of course, police in Florida still relayed the threat to their counterparts in Los Angeles. They were able to determine that the threat against the Hollywood sign was not credible. At the time of this recording, no arrests have apparently been made in the case, and it's unclear if investigators have identified the hapless suspect behind the bungled threat. The situation is still developing.
Authorities in Burlington County, New Jersey are commending a woman for her bravery this week after she made a mad dash for freedom from an alleged attacker who had held her captive for nearly a year. According to reports, the unidentified woman's nightmare began in February of last year when she agreed to give a man she knew as Brett Parker a ride to Arizona. At first, things were fine, and the pair even began a consensual romantic relationship. However, things allegedly took an abrupt turn about a month later when the man, whose real name is James Perillo Jr., began to assault and abuse the woman. Around this same time, he reportedly took away her phone and bank cards and began to start using them for himself. The victim was completely cut off from her family and was terrified of what Perillo would do to her if she tried to leave. For the next several months, reports state that the victim was forced to travel all over the country by Perillo until they recently ended up in Burlington County, New Jersey. They had been staying at a rented room in Bass River Township for about 2 weeks when on February 7th, Perillo allegedly subjected the woman to a vicious assault. When he began to beat and choke her, she decided it was now a matter of life or death. After managing to get away from Perillo, she reportedly ran to a nearby gas station, locking herself inside while he chased after her. Though Perillo initially tried to break down the station's door, authorities say that he was unable to and fled the scene when he realized this. Police caught up with him a short time later and placed him under arrest. He is now facing a number of charges, including first-degree kidnapping, second-degree strangulation and aggravated assault, third-degree criminal restraint, third-degree hindering apprehension, and fourth-degree obstruction. As if all of this weren't terrifying enough, in the days after this story first broke, new reports started to emerge suggesting that this was just the tip of the iceberg concerning Perillo's dark past. Multiple stories have since come out accusing Perillo of a history of having committed similarly terrifying crimes against other women going back decades. While none of these accounts appear to have been confirmed by authorities at this time, they are nonetheless terrifying. As far as we can tell, the stories go back as far as 1993, with previous cases also happening as recently as 2018. Honestly, there's just way too much here to cover in the confines of our Crimes of the Week format, so we may do a long-form video about this case in the near future as the investigation continues and more information becomes available. At the time of this recording, the situation is still developing.
Representatives from Washington, D.C.'s Metropolitan Police Department say that a 15-year-old would-be carjacker got more than he bargained for this week when he allegedly tried to violently steal an elderly woman's vehicle and instead ended up leaving the scene in an ambulance. The incident took place on the morning of February 17th in D.C.'s 22nd Street Southeast neighborhood. It reportedly began when an elderly woman, affectionately known by community members as Grandma, left her home to go to a chemotherapy appointment. She had climbed in her vehicle and was preparing to leave when out of nowhere the 15-year-old male suspect jumped inside and demanded that she hand over her keys. While the elderly woman must have appeared to be an easy target, little did the teenage suspect know that she was anything but. She immediately began to fight back and yelled for family members to try and get their attention. Evidently trying to scare the woman into cooperating, the teen told her that he had a gun. Without batting an eye, however, she stated, quote, "Baby, you better shoot me because you're not taking my car." Not long after, things took a pretty hard turn for the worse for the suspect when neighbors who had heard the commotion ran to the elderly victim's aid. At that point, the 15-year-old tried to run, but he didn't make it very far. Let's just say that it appears he was on the receiving end of a bit of vigilante justice before emergency responders arrived at the scene and he was taken away in an ambulance. It was later discovered that the gun he had on him at the time of the attempted carjacking was fake. At the time of this recording, neither the name of the suspect nor the victim have been released. It's unclear if the teenager is yet facing formal charges.
Authorities in Orange County, Florida say that 3 people are dead this week and at least 2 others are seriously injured after a 19-year-old man allegedly carried out multiple shootings in the same area just hours apart. The incident began at around 11 a.m. on February 22nd when police in the community of Pine Hills were called to the 6100 block of Hialeah Street with reports of a shooting. A woman, later identified as 38-year-old Natasha Augustin, was found dead from a gunshot wound at the scene in her car. By the time officers arrived, the gunman appeared to have fled. Things took a horrifying turn just hours later, however, when police were called back to the exact same location with reports that more shots had been fired. At roughly 4:05 p.m., officers arrived to find two men who had also been shot in a vehicle. The terrifying attack continued when the alleged gunman ran around the corner after attacking the men and entered a nearby home, shooting two more people inside. He was finally arrested shortly after. The victims of the second shooting have since been identified as two members of Orlando's Spectrum 13 news team, 24-year-old reporter Dylan Lyons and photographer Jesse Walden. They were in the area at the time in order to report on the shooting that had happened earlier that morning. The victims of the third shooting are said to be a 9-year-old girl named Tiana Major, as well as her mother, whose name has not been released. Sadly, both Dylan and Tiana succumbed to their injuries, while Jesse and Tiana's mother are currently in critical condition. As for the alleged shooter, he has since been identified as a 19-year-old man named Keith Melvin Moses. Authorities say that Moses had a lengthy criminal history prior to this week's deadly incident that includes gun charges, aggravated battery and assault with a deadly weapon, burglary, and grand theft. At the time of this recording, no motive behind the crime has been released. Police say that Natasha Augustin was an acquaintance of Moses's, but it's believed that he had no connection to any of the other victims. The situation is still under investigation. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a minute to thank our amazing supporters over on Patreon. As many of you are aware, our situation on YouTube always seems to be a bit uncertain, but our patrons help to ensure that we can continue to make content like this long term without having to worry as much about what surprises might be thrown our way. Plus, patrons also get access to 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. If you'd like to help support the channel directly, head over to patreon.com/crimezone to join. You can also find that link in the description below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and take care.